Good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Neumaier, film critic for New York's WOR Radio. Let's have a huge round of applause, please, for his three daughters. And it's my pleasure now to introduce writer-director Azazel Jacobs. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on the film. It's so moving and so wonderful and a perfect movie for this theater, right?
Yes. I mean, yeah, thank you. And thank you for all being here. I watched this theater get built. I came here for so many films that had a big impact. I remember being here for Happiness, and just it's been a very important place. I love the idea that there's maybe the train sound helped and made this 3D in a whole other way. Like, I did think about it while I was mixing, especially that last. I was like, I wonder how that will work at the Angelika, because there'll be this extra. But I am so grateful for this theater to exist, and I just hope it just keeps on. So, thanks.
Absolutely. That train sound is part of the poetry of the Angelika.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this film is full of poetry as well. The experiences that it dramatizes are so personal and so meaningful, and the way the script is it's balanced between the three characters and their humor, and also their coming to grips with so many situations. What was the origin of the story for you?
The origin for the story was a couple things. Definitely going through it in my own way, just with my own parents, and to a degree of just in terms of like them hitting a certain age and health issues and stuff like that. But more than anything about that is that this idea that what's been in the process is natural, and it felt so unnatural and felt so out of control. Every day shifting into something completely else and just trying to get on top of figuring out how to do this. And so the idea of bringing in something that I love doing, filmmaking, and that I feel like I have at least an idea of control that I can, and so much joy with, into that world was something that was a big motivation for me, just to combine these things and get me that sense. And then there was this, I walk around New York City, and I have a little sketch pad of different stories. And then there was kind of a realization one night that, these different stories are actually different people, and they all exist under this household, and that could be, because they're so different, that could be the conflict that drives us forward.
It's such, obviously, for anyone who's gone through it, it is an incredibly personal situation, but it's also very universal, and we all know someone who's gone through some sort of situation like this with a dying parent. It's also very complex, right? It's the situation is such that it's the three sisters are not just grappling with their relationship with their father, but they're dealing with their relationship to each other and even with themselves, and where they sort of fit in with this, right?
That's right. I mean, that was one of the things that I really wanted to do in this beginning, this like very abrasive theatrical, where everybody's delivering these, monologues or defending themselves. I wanted them to present themselves and present themselves to us the way that they believe that they were supposed to be in this family, that they were, we very, very quickly get, that's that type of person, that's that type of person, that's that type of person. But it's, as much as we're getting it, it's also what they're feeling, that they are supposed to be in this family, and that's how they are the role that they're supposed to play. But it's over time and under these circumstances that slowly breaks down and something else reveals itself.
The moment I'm thinking of right now is sort of that moment when Elizabeth Olsen sort of is apologizing, and she puts her hand to her chest, trying to be this very earnest sort of thing, like she wants to be seen as that kind of person who sees other people's pain and is apologetic for anything that she may have caused. But there's a lot going on there under that surface, and even under that gesture, that's self-reflective.
That was one of the amazing things about working with all these actors, was that, it's definitely one thing to write the script, and it was great that they all responded and felt, we're all in agreement that the script works. So it wasn't a conversation about what doesn't work, what needs to be changed. But those things that you're talking about, like I can have something in my mind, but when I see Lizzie Olsen doing something like that, it just takes it to this whole other place that they're all so present. They were all everything that they were doing. So I'd be watching it, and whatever like idea I had for the characters would immediately vanish the moment that they would inhabit it and do it the way that they would do it.
Yeah, let's have a round of applause, please, for those amazing actors: Elizabeth Olsen, Carrie Coon, Natasha Lyonne. They're also terrific, and you wrote the script with all of them in mind. Is that right?
And Giovanna Depo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I worked either with each of them in some way. Definitely had or crossed paths enough that I could get something that I wrote for them directly to them. But yeah, it was about maybe like a third way into the script when I started realizing that I was picturing them. But more than anything, I was hearing them. Like I was hearing their different rhythms. And I knew that they were very different actors, but my movie goes on. But they also, they approach work just with this complete focus, and it's just in the same level, just in a very different approach. So I could hear their voices to a certain degree, and the rhythm that I was really chasing after in this film was the strange thing that like a looming death has on time. Because I found it, I've been finding it, I found in my life very, very odd how time suddenly, like emails and all these things don't matter. You're very, very present, and at the same time, things that you're dreading, suddenly you're waiting for, you know it's happening, and just that shift that happens where some things take really a long time and some things seem to happen very quickly.
Right, and in fact, even in that one monologue that we were just talking about before he came on stage, that in which their father Vincent was talking about a movie, and that it was about the absence, that sort of that films get wrong, and this film gets that absolutely correctly, like that sense of that liminal space that a looming passing brings, right?
Thank you for that. I do. I think it was a big shock for me when, as a young person, a friend, the first time going through a friend suddenly not being, alive, that I felt extremely lied to just in a lot of the films, just in terms of like the lack of slow motion, the lack of any closure, the lack of music, all these things that just felt very like, wait, this person was right there and now they're completely gone, and I can't go backwards whatsoever in the way that you can with films. So I've seen it handled beautifully. It's not that, it's like, it was just a way, and that this was a way for me to, saying that, having Christina say that was a way to address those feelings.
Right, and then of course even the sense of sort of kind of caustic humor or gallows humor, as the case may be, which Natasha Lyonne's character Rachel brings up so well, that there's sort of this sense of it's a defense mechanism, but it's also in some ways the only response in some situations, right, with that going on.
Yeah, and I think the other reason that I wrote for, these three sisters, in particular these actors, is that they all could understand the comedy. Like they would know how to play and see the comedy that I was going for. That it's like a strange tone that can shift very quickly, but that they have that inside of them, and they would be able to recognize it and express it the way that I hoped.
The structure of it obviously has sort of a Chekhovian sort of feel, and we were talking about it out off stage, that you filmed pretty much in sequence, right, and in an actual location, actual apartment, right? Yeah.
So when I got to the script in a version that I was happy with enough to share it with them, I wrote them each and sent them a hard copy of it. I printed it all out and sent it to them because I wanted it to very much exist. Like the films that I saw here at this place, like just from a different time, which was outside of emails and just, this is how we're going to do it. And what I wrote on the letter was, we'll shoot this in order, we'll shoot this on film, we'll shoot this in an actual apartment, I'll have final cut, and this will be ours. Like we will work together as filmmakers. This will start with us, and it will be built out in that way. And so shooting in order is one of those things that you can take advantage of only if you're a small enough film. It's like one of the things that small films really have up on much bigger productions, which is, it was amazing because whenever we were talking about something that, that we're about to do, we could look back at the scene before and we had actually done it, and there was a past rather than something make-believe. And a lot of times in production, you're shooting something that happened earlier, 2 weeks later, or whatever. It's scrambled because of locations or time or whatever.
Yeah. What was the rehearsal period like?
Rehearsals were different in terms of, like, separately, I went out to meet with Lizzie for a few days, and we watched films and we talked. And they have these different approaches. Natasha was more like we met up and really just got a sense of each other. We had really not known each other. Lizzie I had worked with on her show, so we had become friends. And then Carrie I'd known through Tracy Letts, who I did a film with, she's married to. And she really was just like, she had a different, she was just like, I get this, you'll tell me if there's something wrong, but it's all on the page for me, and we don't have to have that conversation. So I think we had about 3 or 4 days in an actual apartment, not the exact apartment we shot in, but in that building, so that we could just go through, and I could really very, very clearly explain, like, oh, this is going to be shot in this very, very particular way. I wrote it with the idea that I would be editing as well. So the angles and the separation, the way that they don't share shots with each other, the kind of isolation that happens, the framing was all very, very particular. And I just talking them through, okay, this is going to be, there's not going to be coverage. There's not going to be this thing that I'm going to figure out how this scene, whose scene this is or whatever it is later on. It's going to be shot specifically, and it'll either live or fail on this idea.
Just a brief note on that, which is that the location and the setting feels, it's so important in a film like this, and in this film in particular, because not only is it obviously a topic of contention between the sisters, or it can be, it's brought up as one, but it's also, it feels very much like this is it reflects in some ways Vincent's life, who he is, and where they grew up, and it's the confinement of it, the claustrophobia of it, and we feel their past in it as much as we feel the present that we're watching, right?
Yeah, the apartment was as important to me as the actors that I wrote for. I wrote for a certain type of apartment that I went to a lot, not the apartment that I grew up in, but not the place that I grew up in, but a place that I would go to visit friends. And so it meant reaching out to lots of kids that I grew up with and just saying, hey, are you still in there? Did you take over? Are your parents still there? Which led me down this kind of amazing preparation in a certain way of just walking into people's lives and finding I'm catching up with people. And that ultimately led me down to the building that we wound up shooting in the Lower East Side. And then my partner and producer, Diaz, and I, who we've been working together, she's a filmmaker as well, on everything that I've done. We went there, was able to put up flyers, got invited into all these homes there. That particular one was a young couple, and it was like very, very sparse and kind of not, new painted. It was very different than that. But when I walked in, I could feel that it had this bones, it had this history, and that if I could, if every frame was going to be so particular, that we could slowly feed out who this family was in these separate frames, and just let it build up in the same way that I'm revealing the characters. That ultimately, all right, that connected, the bathroom's connected to this, and the kitchen's over here, but that would spread out over time in the way that was mimicking the story.
Yeah. And in an apartment or a home, when it's the last surviving parent when they pass, that's an important thing. It kind of comes up, and so it's a really interesting that this film captures that so perfectly. Let's also talk about the other characters that sort of define them in some ways. Benji and even Katie and Christina's families that we hear them speaking to on the phone, because that defines them in different ways as well and gives us other aspects of their personalities, right?
Yeah, I mean, Javon was somebody that I worked with on Lizzie Olsen's show, Sorry for Your Loss, and just we got on, and he inspired me immediately, and he just stayed in my mind. So it wasn't so surprising that I was writing for him, because there's certain people you meet, and you're just like, oh, I want to do more with this person. I could see that we can connect. I had a sense that he would come in and be able to say these things that just Rachel couldn't, that it was really, really important that somebody would reveal this thing that we understand, we know to a certain degree, but he gets to say these things about the apples and just like give them a sense that even though Katie completely rejects it, we know that it lands. We can feel it, which is part of why she blows up on him in my mind as well. But, there's very few things that what was nice about, Javon coming in and J.O. Sanders, who plays the father, coming in, was that it really disrupted. We were shooting so quickly, so closely. we're all packed into this place, and then a new person comes in, and it has the same effect where we're just trying to figure out, okay, there's a new rhythm, there's just a new sound to this, and they have to absorb and react to it in the way that it happens in the film.
One of the things that I think is amazing is that even before we see him, Vincent is such a character in absentia, which is really phenomenal, and the sense of it's very palpable how present he is in the film, how we have a sense of him, and then when Jay shows up, and Jay's obviously done great work for decades, and JFK and Revolutionary Road and so many great things on TV, Crime Story. Let's talk about that monologue that happens. That feels we were talking about all that jazz and Amour and some of those amazing films. That scene of his that we realize is not actually happening, it's happening in his mind, is kind of transporting. Let's talk about the writing and the creation of that.
Well, I could say just in terms of the writing that it wasn't my plan, like that I always thought when I sat down to work on this that the father would be in the room and that he'd be represented by these heartbeats, and that the idea of going into that room was I wasn't interested in doing a death scene in that way. I just didn't feel comfortable, and I didn't feel like just wasn't my interest. But when I was writing and the sisters go in there, and then suddenly I was writing that they come out with him, I was shocked at myself and shaken, and I felt like, oh no, I set up this rule, and it was like very simple, elegant, small movie, and now suddenly I was breaking this rule, and that worried me, and that excited me because suddenly I was like, oh, I like things that can break their own rules. But then it became very important to me to hear what this father had to say, and since I kind of embraced this idea that people get to speak whatever it was, the idea that somebody gets this chance to say, I love you, and I'm sorry, and here's something that you don't know about me, became really, like, I wanted to hear the father, and I also really needed it for my own self. And I felt like maybe this would be something that the audience would also, even if the sisters aren't hearing this, that it was worth to give to us, that we get to hear who this father was, and that this would only make his absence more felt, because we know something, such a particular detail in this story that he talks about bliss that like only us know, something he never was able to share. I should say that Jay and Rudy Galvin, who plays the hospice nurse Angel, and Jose Phoebus, like all the other roles, and Jasmine Bracey, they all came through casting director Nicole Rusto, who I've been working with for many years. And so, sitting down with them and meeting them, you get a sense of what they could do, but then they come in, and so, let's just say we're talking with Jay, he came in just like they all did, completely off the book, memorized these many, many pages. I think it was at least 9 pages of like straight up dialogue. And because we're shooting this in order, we're at the very end, it definitely felt like a big presence that we all had to kind of figure out how this did. And when I watch not only what he does, but how each of the girls look at him, what it does to Lizzie when she just takes him in, when he's apologizing to her, it really is, I could feel it in real time, it transcendent off of whatever I wrote.
And then there is, of course, that great sort of other facet of the diamond that you're just not anticipating, which is when we see them all sort of huddled together, and Carrie puts her arm sort of around Elizabeth, and kind of, and it's the way their father would want them to be seen, the way they in some ways want to be themselves, but are not necessarily like that in real life. It's a beautiful moment.
Yeah, it was, and it was shooting it for me. It was, it's the only time we're really seeing the three of them all together, and the idea that they are huddled together in this way. And then also, I love that it's Christina that's in the middle. That she's been trying to disappear so much, and then suddenly she's the thing that they all are leaning against, and that this thing about Mirabella that keeps coming up, she jumps to the thing that that comforts her kid, and it works. It gives them this thing that, like, okay, there's purpose to how she's been this whole time.
This is such an emotional film and so beautifully played. How do you want audiences to think about it? What do you hope people take away from the film?
I have to say that this film has been a great experience for me, even though it's about dealing with these things. And it's not that I didn't go through being very moved when I was shooting and watching it. I definitely have gotten extremely moved being with an audience and hearing them connect when they've connected. But it's been that thing for me, which I love doing. I loved writing this. I loved being on set. I loved watching this happen. The edit room, just being left alone, walking down to like Little Italy and being in a room and just being with this material, seeing these amazing, what the cinematographer, what this crew had done, what it's given, and then getting to premiere and show the film and Netflix taking it on. Like, it's just been a very joyful experience, and I want that for people. I want there to be something cathartic about this story. I want there to be I hope that there's some recognition that, yes, this feels unnatural, but we are in this together, and this is part of the, yeah.
The film beautifully captures that in so many ways. It is in select theaters, special theaters like the Angelika for the next few weeks, and then it is streaming on Netflix September 20th. Thank you so much for being here, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Azazel Jacobs, and the
Thank you
film
so
is
much.
His Three Daughters. Thank you so much.
Thank you.